Hello, and today I'm going to talk to you about 9 of the biggest beginner gardener mistakes that almost every beginner makes in their time. And I'm going to speak you through how you can try and avoid these mistakes at all costs. And I'm making this video today because obviously with any hobby or sport or anything, there's always beginner mistakes to be made. And I often see on people's social media when they start out gardening that they make these mistakes. The mistakes always stand out to me, and I think I want to make a video to show you all of these mistakes and to try and stop you at home, you the new beginner, from making these mistakes. And make sure, if you've got any friends who are new to gardening, make sure you go down and share this video with them, because I'm sure they'll really appreciate it, or you helping out a new gardener. So the first mistake I'm going to be talking to you about is digging the soil, and this really frustrates me when I see people digging their soil to get rid of weeds, or get rid of weeds. Really, they're making a bigger problem for them in the future, because as you will know from my no dig video, that digging your soil is probably one of the worst things you could do or one of the best things if you want to get less harvests. No, not digging your soil in the no dig method is where you don't dig the soil, and say you want to make a new bed where there's grass or weeds, you just make a thick layer of cardboard and a thick layer of compost, or a mulch of compost over the cardboard, and you can just plant straight into that after maybe a week or two of having it down. And if it's dry, make sure you water it. And what this will do is it will not disturb the soil, so all the worms and things aren't being torn out from their homes. Basically, they're all happily doing their job basically, and the microbes and everything, all the fungus, basically the soil is undisturbed. So it's like if humans weren't here and we got to the soil, that's how the soil would be. And if you think about it, naturally, when the plants would have grown before humans cultivated them, they wouldn't have been dug, the soil. There's no one coming in with a fork digging it over. How it would have been was the seed fell, it grew, and then made all the food. So that's why you try and imitate it in your garden, which is a bit of a permaculture method as well, where you look at nature, you observe, and then you imitate it in your own garden to get a better ecosystem and make it better for wildlife and growing food. Another mistake commonly made by beginner gardeners and vegetable growers is watering at the wrong times. And the worst one for this is on a sunny day. Unlike today, today's nice and refreshing. We've also had our first rain in a while, in about 2 months, so it's quite nice not having to water the garden. And using water midday on a hot sunny day is one of the worst things you could do. One, it wastes water because it evaporates straight off the soil when it's warm, and also the plants, if you get it on the leaves and it's really hot, it could burn the leaves, and this can set them back a bit, so your harvest is more delayed and prolonged, which can be a bad thing. And also, it's also not very good watering. Well, you can water in the evening, which is better than in midday, but I recommend you do it early morning, because one, it gives you a reason to get up early and be productive in the day, and also watering in the evening is encouraging slugs, because slugs are nocturnal mainly, and they do most of their activity in the night, which means if you water in the evening and they like damp conditions, you're giving them that condition and that habitat for them to eat all of your plants overnight. Whereas if you leave it dry overnight, they'll try and find somewhere else to do it, and it's not your garden, and then you water it in the day, and then your plants will be much happier. You won't have eaten plants, which will then mean you're much happier. The next one is also related to soil, and what it is feeding the plants with things like shop-bought liquid feeds and those little pellets that you put in soil, and not feeding it with compost. And I like to compare this to eating porridge versus a banana. A banana will give you quick release energy. A porridge or something like that, a cereal, will give you a prolonged amount of energy basically. So a banana will give you quick energy, porridge will give you prolonged energy. And that's just like feeding with organic matter in your soil, because what this does is it feeds your soil and it releases it to the plants over a longer time, and it also retains moisture. Whereas if you provide a liquid feed, it works quicker, but it doesn't last as long. So you can now see why I compared it to bananas and porridge. But liquid feeds can be useful in some cases. If you make it with your own nettles, like I've got growing here, or you make it with comfrey or something like that, your own liquid feed, or you can also buy organic seaweed feeds for your tomatoes. And tomatoes is the one thing that I would feed with a liquid feed religiously. I hardly ever feed anything with liquid feeds unless it's my own homemade nettle feed. And I'm also looking into getting comfrey next year, but I'm not sure. And yeah, so tomatoes are one of the only things I would recommend for you to provide with a liquid feed. Sowing your own seeds is one of the best things you can do for your garden, and also for your pocket, because it saves you a lot of money. Ready grown seeds and plants in garden centres are very expensive. So if you buy seeds, or even save your own seeds, this will save you money, and often home saved seeds have germinated better with me than shop bought seeds. Mainly probably because I grow organically and some of the seed companies don't, but you can find loads of organic seed companies out there if you are going to buy seeds. And this brings me on to my next point, which is pushing it with the sowing times. So whether it's pushing it too early or too late, this can be quite detrimental to your crop. For example, last year, and I still consider myself a beginner, last year I planted my cucumbers far too late, which I blame on my greenhouse not being built yet, so I have got an excuse. But having that planted too late, we only got 2 cucumbers, whereas if I'd planted it at the right time, a bit earlier, I would have gotten a lot of more prolonged harvest. And this means if you push it too early, it likely won't work all the time. If you're in a hotter climate, it might do, but in the UK, in a temperate climate, it doesn't work all the time. And there's some things that you can push, but on a general thing, follow the seed packet. My next tip is, or the next mistake that's commonly made, is quite a common one. And this is to plant plants too closely together and not thin out when you're planting directly. And this is a big mistake. I see lots and lots of people doing this. And don't get me wrong, there's some things you can multi-sow, such as beetroot, leeks, and there's many more. And multi-sowing is great, but not for everything. You can also multi-sow peas, but if you're going to multi-sow, make sure you're multi-sowing the right things, because not everything can be multi-sown. For example, not potatoes, maybe let's say lettuce, or a head of lettuce. If you push this too close, these won't get as big, a head of lettuce, so they'll be pushing against each other, and this also makes a great environment for slugs and vermin and things to hide, to be able to eat your plants then, which then goes against trying to avoid pests. If you plant them a bit further apart, it might be counterintuitive not trying to fit as much food as you can in the same space, but just spreading them slightly apart will mean that you'll get a bigger harvest from each individual plant. Sometimes things like peas, that doesn't matter because they'll all climb up the same structure anyway, so it's not the end of the world. But things, for example, such as brassicas, so sprouts, if you plant them too closely, they can get a bit horrible and some of them can rot and it goes all smelly, and I learned that the hard way. And that's the other thing, you learn a lot of these things the hard way as a beginner. But I want to try and avoid letting you have these mistakes, and I want to let you learn from my mistakes. The next mistake that people commonly make is taking off more than you can use or more than you can handle at first, or the first year you're growing. For example, this bed behind me, which is I think about 4 metres by 1 metre, in 2018 when I started the Welsh Gardener, I started getting back into vegetable growing, and this was the only vegetable patch that I used. And now I've got I've got about basically 3 2 square metre beds up there, raised beds, and this bed here down the side. And this shows that you can expand in the future, but it's best to get and understand growing food and try and avoid mistakes like this in your first year on a smaller plot than going with big. And even if you have a small holding or you've just moved to a new small holding, what you should do is you should start with a few beds, or you could have all the beds there but plant in a few and then gradually introduce more into your plan every year until eventually you could be self-sufficient. And the next one is not saving seeds, where it's sort of two compiled into one, is not saving seeds and not successionally sowing seeds. And here, in the middle of my forget-me-nots, I've got purple sprouting broccoli in my flower bed that I let go to seed. And all these seed pods I'll be harvesting once they've dried out, and I'll harvest the seed so I can grow it next year, or even this year if I want to successionally sow them. And succession sowing is an amazing thing. For example, you can have lettuce, and rather than sowing all of your seeds at once, you'll have a row at a time or something, or maybe a module tray at a time, and you plant this number in certain intervals. You decide the intervals, say 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks you sow lettuce. When you plant it out, you'll see a height difference in them, and you'll harvest this lot, and then you'll go on to the next row, then on to the next row, and then what you can keep doing is replacing those rows with new plants then. So it's basically, you'll have constant harvest of that crop. And this is also done really well with beetroot and carrots and root vegetables. Potatoes not so much so, but things like carrots and your beetroots and turnips, radish, things like that, succession sowing is great. But things that have a longer sowing to harvest time, like kale, sprouts, brassicas, succession sowing might not be as good, or you could do it in a longer interval. So things such as leeks that take a long time to grow. You could sow some in early summer and some late summer, and then you'll have a really, really long harvest. Also, broad beans, they're good. You can overwinter them as well. There's just really good succession sowing rates with broad beans. So it's just started raining, so I've got the camera tucked under a tree there, and I'm out in the elements here. And the next, or the last tip, is to never give up. And I see people giving up just because maybe one thing did wrong. Not giving up gardening in general, but giving up growing one crop. For example, until last year or this year, I've been awful at growing potatoes, and I couldn't grow them in the ground. So what you do is you look into different ways and you adapt. And I watched loads of YouTube videos, especially Tony O'Neill at Simplified Gardening's videos, about growing in 30-litre buckets. And so what I did, I got some 30-litre buckets, and now I'm growing in buckets this year to try it out. You've just got to try and adapt sometimes, because maybe your soil won't be as good for that crop, or you plant it at the wrong time that year or something, but you can't give up. I can't stress this enough. Never give up gardening, or anything in fact, because there's always different ways to do the same thing. I'd just like to take this time out of the video to make sure that you've gone down below, hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell to make sure that you're notified next time I upload. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learnt something from these mistakes that I made when I was a beginner, and hope that you learn and implement these tips that I've given you in your garden. If you know any beginner gardeners, make sure you share this video with them. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.